Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Medina. Welcome to the session, Research Without Reason is Chaos, where we're going to examine how well-structured research efforts are a conduit for design value. Our speaker today is Chris Wilkinson, Director of Product Design for DevBridge. Chris uses his background in humanities and design to generate real change through being intentional about design. Growing up surrounded by tall stalks of corn, he now finds himself in golden fields of sticky notes. Throughout the year, he can be found building digital products for Fortune 500 companies, facilitating trainings for top organizations, cheering on the Cubs from the friendly confines of Wrigley, and settling down for a solid board game night. Now, before we meet Chris and begin the session, I just have two quick reminders for our audience. First, please type in any questions for our speaker during the presentation in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. He'll join us for a live Q&A when the presentation concludes. The chat feature will also be turned on if you want to chat amongst yourselves during the presentation. Also, please don't forget to rate this session when it's over. You'll be prompted to answer 4 quick questions, and it's so helpful to the speakers to get the feedback and to the How team as they look to program future events. If you missed a session rating from any previous sessions you've attended today, you can now access them on the speaker profile. Okay, now without further ado, let's welcome Chris Wilkinson to the How Design Live stage.
Hi, my name is Chris Wilkinson. I'm the Director of Product Design at DevBridge. And today I'm here to talk to you about how to make research a part of the work that you do. Now, when we're talking about research, let's talk about why we would engage in research to start. Research can help us in a lot of different ways. One of those ways is to help us build understanding. It can help us to gain new understanding of a domain that we don't have experience in and help us expand our own horizons in terms of the industries and the problems that we're able to tackle. It can help us discover new potential solutions to problems that we haven't considered before. And it can help us validate any hypotheses that we might have about how a product should work. It's kind of a multi-tool to help us understand different aspects of what it means to design great products and to make great designs. Now, there's a couple keys to doing research successfully, and today I want to talk to you about the things that you should keep in mind to make sure that your research is reasonable and effective and generates the right kind of outcomes for you and your work. The first thing you have to do is make sure that you're trying to answer the right questions, and the right questions really at the right time. If you're doing divergent thinking, if you think about that double diamond that we all know from design, it's about asking questions like, is this the right thing? Will people use it? What are the potential solutions behind the opportunity that we've identified? As we start to build things, we can start asking questions like, does it work? And will it get results? And then we can also say, okay, we have a product that's out there. We have something we've designed out in the wild. Is it actually worth it? Is it worth this being in the wild, and are we getting the return that we expected? And if it's out there and it is successful, how can we make it better? And when you're intentional about the kinds of questions that you ask, you're able to get more of a return on your investment in research because you're matching up the questions to the kinds of information that you might receive. Now, when you think about what it would take to get a research program started, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You don't have to be in a situation where you either are always doing research or you're never doing it at all. To make it part of the work that you do, it's important to integrate it in the normal cycle that you would have as a part of any kind of design work or any kind of delivery work that your team might be doing. It's that learn, build, and measure loop. And all 3 of those steps are really important to building a successful research program. If you find yourself in a build, build, build loop, you can still learn, but it's a lot more expensive. If all you're doing is building and building and building, and then you say, let's just ship something and ship something else and keep shipping things out, and you never take that time to build that understanding, it's quite an expensive way to learn things about the product and how it might work. That's where research can help make things a little bit more accessible and reduce the investment that you have to make those learnings happen. Now, if all you're doing is just trying to build understanding and you're not trying to actually build anything at all, that's where you get into wasteful research that's actually draining on the team, and it's draining on really the potential for what you can achieve. Because if all you do is learn and learn and learn, you're burning cycles and you're never getting a chance to realize that's value. That's because the value of the research that you do is realized once you have integrated it into the product that you're working on and once that product is in people's hands. We'll talk about how to do that here in a minute. And if all you're doing is measuring and you're never really incorporating that measurement, you're just taking stock constantly, this is where you can get into trouble with research, because if all you're doing is measuring, it means that you might be a thermometer. That's really the only thing you're able to do, is just take the temperature, but never actually turn that reading into action. And that's because designing great products means you have to take time to understand the intersection of the user value and the business need. You have to find where those two things meet, and research is a way that can help bring that intersection into clarity, into focus. To do that, we have to account for the complete picture. Now, obviously, we know about the importance of having a good product and a user well understood, integrating those two things together with the opportunity that we've identified in the greater business context. All of those things factor in together into what makes a great product. You need all of those ingredients to really account for what you need for that product to be successful. But if we don't do that, if we don't do research, we don't account for the complete picture, we find ourselves in a build, build, build loop where we never learn, or all we do is learn, or all we do is measure. Without all of that, what happens? Well, if you never actually take the time to ship something out to market, you're left with uncertainty. If you stay in an R&D mode forever and you don't actually put a product out in the open, this uncertainty just builds and builds and builds and builds, and you have to resolve that uncertainty by shipping it out to market. The other side of this is, if all you do is ship small spikes of research out to market and you don't actually build and develop them fully, you find yourself caught in a loop of innovation. You're not really innovating, you're more just trying out a bunch of ideas and seeing what might stick to the wall. And then if you build an elaborate research program, but you don't actually create the steps necessary to integrate that research program into realized value, you're in a situation where you have information overload. All you have is data and data and data and data. The team becomes overwhelmed and the business becomes overwhelmed, and it's never turned over into something valuable. It diminishes the return of investment happening on your research program. Research is really about building a better shared understanding. That shared understanding applies to the people that are going to be using the product, the people that are building that product, and the business that is making the investment in that product being built. Speaking of people, people are really, really important in any of the work that we do. And research is a way to make sure that we don't lose sight of them in the things that we design. And the reality is, people are going to use what you design and build. People are going to use it. And so we owe it to them to make sure that what we design and what we build is going to be something that is useful and productive for them and helps them meet and accomplish their goals. To do that, there's a couple things that we have to understand. We have to understand the people, the individual person, and the objective they're trying to accomplish. Anything that we design is helping to facilitate this gap between a person and their objective. And so the more that we can understand both of those groups of things, we're going to have a better ability to meet those needs. Now, the first is understanding the outcome and the outcome that we're going to generate. And really anything that we design and any research that we do isn't fully realized, and it really isn't finished until we have that final outcome. And you can see, if you're familiar with this situation, there's another step to be taken here. That's because great design is only achieved once a desired outcome is realized. Everything that we design and build helps people to take action on a problem that they're looking to solve. And so once you begin to understand the outcome that you're looking to generate, you can then get to the point where you're starting to pick what is the right research activity that I should deploy to learn about the questions that I have for the business, the questions that I have for the product. There's a lot of different activities that you can undertake in a research program, and I'm not going to get into all of those today. Each and every one of them is worthy of its own session. But what I will say is, it's important to be mindful of the potential outcomes of any research that you undertake with any different methodology. And there's a couple of different ways this manifests. Some research is going to be more quantitative. You're going to have more hard data behind it. Other research is going to be more qualitative. It's going to have more ascriptive detail to it. In the same way, the data that you collect might be more exploratory in nature, where you're going and you're drawing conclusions from connecting multiple different data points, or it might be straight reporting data, where you're taking temperature of specific items. Every aspect and every methodology behind research falls into a spectrum of different possibilities, from qualitative to quantitative research and from exploratory to reporting data. Understanding the potential outcomes from each kind of research that you might undertake helps you decide which path to take when you deploy that research program. I will say it's very important to make sure that you focus on the outcome that you're looking to generate more so than the methodology. If you get trapped in saying, well, every aspect of research has to be A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z, you're going to be in a situation where you're spending more time chasing a method than chasing an impact to the business. Now, if you're not familiar with a lot of different methodologies, it's pretty easy to ramp up to it. And here's a couple steps you can consider to do that. You need to create a clear research plan. And to create that plan, there's 5 ingredients that you need. You need to identify the method, understand the team and the time, the resources that are going to go into it, and the outcome that you want to generate. Here's a template that you can consider if you're looking to compose your thoughts around a research plan. For this effort, we plan to utilize a handful of research methods in order to understand a goal or hypothesis. To execute this, we're going to need time, team, and resources. We expect to share our learnings by a certain time, and if we don't execute this plan, we will assume the following assumptions and believe that it will come with the expected risk. See, the last part there is really important. Whenever you're talking about building out a research plan and building research in and communicating it not only to your product team, but also to the stakeholders, you need to communicate the assumptions and the risks that go into that research, because it's able to help us disambiguate those assumptions and disambiguate uncertainty by learning about what's happening in the market. But if we don't do it, those assumptions are going to linger. And every one of those assumptions are potential risks to the product. This is why it's so important that we actually fully investigate the situation and understand it rather than going in blind. We need to sit and understand every aspect of the research process in order to generate that outcome. It also means to make sure that you have a good research script in advance and that you have the right participants for the research. You have to ask the right questions in the right way. And how you ask it is as important as what you ask. For instance, you could say, do you want to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? A slightly better question might be, would you like a sandwich? Now we're getting a little bit more wide about whether or not a sandwich is the thing they might desire. We can be even wider about it and say, what would you like for lunch? Or instead say, are you hungry? And if we really want to learn about someone, we could ask them, when you are hungry, what's your go-to? What's your favorite meal? The way that we ask a question to learn about a situation shapes the kind of information that we'll receive. That's why it's so important to ask broad questions that get at the core of the problem that you're looking to solve, rather than very prescriptive questions that might result in a yes or no answer. The other component to asking those questions is who you're asking the questions of. It's those participants. It's really important that you understand your research participants and which kind of participant that you're speaking with. So I want to break down a couple of different types of research participants for you now. The first is the participant. This is a research persona that is as straightforward as it sounds. It is someone who shows up and they participate in the research with you. They give you the answers. You jot down those answers. They're engaged. They have the right kind of context. It's a good fit. There's a few other kinds that you need to look out for. The next kind to look out for is what I might call the star pupil. This is somebody who always wants to have the right answer and always wants to give you the right answer in the research cycle. Maybe they're really excited about an incentive that you offered, or maybe they just really like hanging out and doing research with folks. Whatever the case might be, you have to be mindful that sometimes when you're doing research, you might get biased information from a source like this, someone who only wants to feed you what they think you want to hear. The other one is the saboteur. This is a person or a research participant who maybe actually doesn't like your product, maybe doesn't like what you're trying to design, doesn't like the problem that you're trying to solve. So they volunteered to participate in research to try and give you bad data and to throw you off. This is a little bit rarer to run into, but in some topics and areas that can hit close to home, you're more likely to run into somebody who's going to say something that is intentionally wrong or intentionally misleading, and it might upset the data that you find and make it more difficult to arrive at a proper conclusion. Usually you can figure out pretty quickly if someone has this type of personality in a research cycle. The final type of participant that you're going to find is that best ideal participant. This is somebody who is engaging you in an honest conversation. This is somebody who is genuinely a potential user of the product that you're working on or is genuinely experienced in the domain that you're looking to learn about. When you get learnings from these best participants, these ideal participants, these kinds of personas in research are the ones that you really want to keep connected to. Because especially if you're working on a product where you're looking to roll it out and it's a new initiative, these best participants can become champions of the product because they have a sense of ownership that's generated in participating with the research process. Now, after you understand the kind of questions that you want to ask and you have an idea of the people that you're talking to, you have to make sure, of course, that you're effectively engaging the business in the research process. And something to keep in mind is that when you're talking to the business about engaging in resources or research, it's often that they've already dedicated resources to what they're going to build. They already have a plan and they already have a path forward. They already have an idea of how it's going to turn out. It's also possible that they're afraid to get started because they're buried by uncertainty. This is where research can help the business overcome that gap. See, they have that desire to start, but uncertainty, doubt, and anxiety is stopping them from getting to a point of delivering value. The first thing that you need to do is to help them build on what you already know. By summarizing for the business everything that's already understood, it's easier to identify where those gaps are. And when you can accelerate past those gaps, that's where you're able to overcome the freeze moment and get started and actually begin to make something valuable that you can learn about and decide together through that research program. You land that effort, you land that jump by having clear goals and metrics behind what you're going to do. Those clear goals and metrics that you share with the business are the path to actually fully realizing and delivering that value. And when they sense there's a clear path between the current state and an end state of delivered value, and there's clear goals and metrics behind what's going to happen, they're more likely to make that investment. The key to this is you have to go fast. You can't be in a situation where you're sitting and you're waiting for what's possible. You have to accelerate through that moment. And that also means helping the business set priorities. See, doing research isn't just about doing research. It's about helping build that shared understanding with all the parties involved. That means helping the business understand where to focus the attention and where we can potentially have learnings. There's a couple different groups to consider here. First, second, third, fourth priorities. We've all used something like this with the business. How do we actually get started? And you try to put it into 4 buckets. The thing is, if you give most business stakeholders these 4 buckets, the actual size of the buckets ends up looking something a little bit more like this. Everything needs to happen first. Some things need to happen second. A few things can happen third, and then everything else. There's only a couple things in that 4th pass. It's important to get a consistent cadence of learning and discovery happening around a research program. And so this is where you can facilitate the business through an activity where you're trying to break down what needs to happen now, what needs to happen soon, what needs to happen later, and what needs to happen someday. By abstracting away the language a little bit, it actually becomes easier for people to ascribe priority to different groups of items because they're able to chunk out their understanding in something that's not as connected. You're not saying never, nothing has a no. And the reality is sometimes in a business context, what happens first and second, they think are the only things that are going to get done. But we're not saying no to anything. We're just saying some things are definitely clear now and some things are definitely clear that need to happen someday. But how do you decide what goes into which bucket? Here's a 2x2 exercise that you can use with the business to rank all the different items that you have as potential areas of focus. The things that are clear versus unclear, and the things that have clear value versus potential value. If there's a clear path to value, clear understanding of where to go next, and it's a highly valuable piece of work, that's something you should focus on immediately. Whereas if it's a little bit more unclear and the potential of the value is there, but it's a much more uncertain, that's perhaps something that you focus on someday. See, this 2x2 can help you identify areas of focus that'll help build that trust and build that rapport with business stakeholders that either are not as experienced with research or have more priorities than they know what to do with. Now, if you're successful in this effort, you're going to be in a position where the business sees you as a trusted partner and also as someone they want to go to answer more and more questions for them. It's important to keep in mind that this is science and not magic. You don't want to be in a situation where you're viewed as a mystical arcade Zoltar that if you put a couple quarters in will magically have the answer every time. Because research is a science. It's an approach to building understanding and to realizing and discovering new learnings. It's not something where you magically get an answer every time. And Sometimes you shouldn't get every answer out of it. Sometimes you should leave research with more questions. By engaging the business throughout the process, you're able to make sure you don't find yourself in this situation. Here's what that looks like. We need to break down what we're trying to learn for the business, how we're going to learn it, and where we expect that it's going to lead us. Here's another template that you can use to engage with the business on having this conversation. Our hypothesis is that if we build a solution in a specific way, it will result in a measurable outcome for the business. To validate this, we plan to execute this core research activity and learn about the specific and prioritized and focused objective that the business has provided. We're going to integrate these learnings through a post-research plan, and we anticipate we will then get to whatever the expected next step might be. By dropping in the appropriate information in this template, it can help have a conversation with the business where they understand that it's not just about magically getting to an outcome, but it's also about the journey, about how you get there and all the details that go into it. Having a clear line to the next step is really important. When you do this, you're able to get to the point where you have a regular conversation with the business about what work to do next. I recommend keeping a backlog of business hypotheses, potential questions that the business wants to answer, and then prioritizing that backlog. Then that backlog of business hypotheses can become a research backlog of specific research activities that you're looking to execute. When you have hypotheses that need definition and research that needs executing, you can then break up that work into the specific tasks that need to happen, and you can share that work among a team. You can then prioritize that work and decide where we need to focus first. And from there, you can estimate the complexity of the work to be done. Some research is going to take longer than others. And when you have a clear line into what that complexity looks like, you can provide predictable progress to the business of how to get to that final solution. In these charts, if you haven't used Agile pointing before, it might look a little bit concerning that I have a progress chart and the mark is going down. That is a burn down chart that reflects a backlog being totally resolved. Points are a great way to estimate complexity because they abstract away from time and from the actual work to be done. It just talks about how complex the task is. If you try to educate everyone on every aspect of research, you're going to have a harder time communicating the work to be done than if you're able to abstract it away into something like points. It's also important to be transparent throughout the process. If you get into a situation where you're hiding aspects or challenges with research because they conflict with what you initially told the business, you find yourself in a pretty challenging situation. When you're putting together a deck or a readout or any kind of summary for the business about the research, it's important to pace it out in such a way that they're on the journey with you. So here's a way that you can consider doing that. You have a key objective you're looking to achieve, why you chased it, and how you went about it. Maybe there's a second or a third, as many as you have, but take each of these one by one in steps. Make it clear about what will happen if you don't try to answer those questions and you try to move forward without that information. Then you're going to have a few observations that come from that work. Make it clear from every observation that you glean from research what you're going to do with it next. From all of that, you're going to be able to then share, okay, here is our anticipated outcome, and here is what we think this is going to become, and here is where we think this is going to go next. And when you take them on this clear journey and these clear steps, they're a part of that research effort rather than saying, hey, you gave me this question, I went and answered it for you, and here's the answer. They may begin to question that answer because it conflicts with their own experiences. Taking them on a journey is a great way to get around that. It's all about that hypothesis, the research that you execute, and the outcome that you generate for the business. As you build a more mature research practice, you can begin to have specific plays that you run for different scenarios. I want to show you one that we use with our team. So we build custom products, custom digital products for our clients. DevBridge builds bespoke custom software, and a lot of times people come to us with products that may or may not be viable for their market or viable for the solution. This is a flowchart that we use internally, and I know it's a decision tree, it's a flowchart, but having these set steps established for us helps us make sure that we don't miss anything as a team. We even go as far as to say the team that's going to be needed, a blend of product managers, product designers, and engineers, how much time it's going to take and what the output's going to be. And then we have a rough schedule that we're able to follow. And that schedule then can help not only our team prepare, but also our clients prepare for the work that's going to be done. From all of this planning and all this effort, the clarity then is provided and a clear decision can be made about whether or not it's worth the investment. And then throughout the research process, we look for those moments where we can be co-creative with our clients, where we can do design activities like a Crazy 8 collaborative sketching, or investigating and doing service blueprinting and service design with their clients. That's another conversation as well. But I think it's a very powerful way to get in and understand the way that a business works and a business functions. All of this is a part of a research effort. Now, once you complete a research effort for the business, when you bring those findings back, you can then share something like, during our research, we executed a plan that involved a handful of steps that we took. We believed in the hypothesis that we tested that would help us learn about a specific or focused objective. The research showed us the following findings. We propose integrating it by these following steps. Again, these templates are a great way to make sure that you're not leaving anything out in the conversations that you're having with your business partners, because they're going to be very curious about how you got to the conclusions that you arrived at. Now, I know some of these are very descriptive. They can also be quite simple. Let's go talk to 7 people about their experiences with a subject we want to learn about. Don't let any sort of complexity or methodology get in the way of your ability to bring value to the business through the work that you do as a team. Make sure that you have that clear path and that clear desire of what you want to answer, but don't let extra complexity stop you from giving research a try. So, final thought, when you're successful with research, it can often feel like the solution to all of your problems. Now, you as a professional who's experienced with research probably haven't had this problem in some time, but it's very possible to get into a situation where the business feels like research is always their golden ticket. This is why it's so important to be honest and to not overpromise with the business what is possible in the work that you do. This is why we need to be clear about the hypotheses that we look to answer, the research program that we look to run, and the outcomes that we hope to generate. At the end of the day, the work that we do is for people trying to accomplish an objective. It's for people looking for an outcome, but really it's people living their lives. It's people doing the work. It's people trying to solve a problem. And when we bring that empathy to a research conversation, we do all of the hard work up front and make sure that there's rigor and science behind the work that we do. We're able to help those individuals accomplish the tasks they look to accomplish. I want to leave you with this quote that really stands with me kind of as one that reflects the way to approach design in any uncertain situation. This is from Marie Curie. Nothing in life is to be feared. It's only to be understood. Now is the time for us to understand more so that we may fear less. And I hope that all of you are able to take research, integrate it into your practices in a fuller way, understand more about your customers and the business, and help the business and your teams also fear the unknown a little bit less, embrace those new understandings, and chase that next great outcome. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you joining me for today's presentation. Please do reach out. My contact information is here. Email, Twitter, LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation and keep the conversation going. And with that, we have a little bit of time for questions. So let's have some Q&A. Thank you again.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Chris, welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Great presentation. Thank you. I love that quote at the end. Just a reminder to everyone here in the room, the Q&A feature at the bottom is where you can type any questions you have for Chris, and I'll be happy to send them off to him. I'd love to get started, Chris, with a question that popped in my head as I was watching your presentation. The Zoltar image just stayed with me, and the magic versus science. I mean, that's a learned trait in this field. Would you not say? It's not something we come out of design school already embracing holistically for the most part? I mean, how do you coach people up to that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because there is so much expertise that goes into design, but it's an area that the business is very comfortable talking about because it's visual, and everyone can talk about what their visual preferences are. And so I think the best way to sort of approach those conversations so it feels like science and not like magic is to focus on talking about the specific steps that you took rather than the color of the button or the layout of the page. If you come in and you say, we did research with the users and we chose this particular hue of blue because users said after they saw it, they felt really good about the application. Well, now the business is open for debate about every color and every button placement. Whereas if you have the conversation saying, yes, so we selected this layout and this workflow because the completion rate was 35% higher than the other ones. And after using it, we got an overall positive rating from the people that used it. Now the conversation is about the outcomes that you're generating and not the aesthetic choices. And I think when you get to the science versus magic piece, the more you can be focused on the actual concrete data rather than the aesthetics, the more powerful the conversation is that you're going to have.
Do you work regularly with data scientists now? Is that part of your world?
It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think the data scientist side of things, I think if you're a designer product professional, the more that you can learn about that field and to speak with these folks who have the ability to go and look through large sets of data and make sense of it, the better equipped you're going to be to learn and also to discover where to head with your products next. The piece too, and data scientists have the same problem. They're kind of taking some heat off of designers right now, to be honest, in terms of being the magicians in the business. But it's the same thing where they're actually approaching everything programmatically, intentionally. And so when you are able to engage in an engineering team or a data scientist team on their own turf, speaking their language, and even bringing data scientists and bringing engineers with you when you do research, the better your team's going to be able to work together, because those data scientists and those engineers care just as much about the customer and the outcome as a designer does. Designers don't have the market cornered about caring about the customer. Everybody in the business does. And so the more we can pull them into those efforts, the better off we're going to be.
How do you combat the argument that too much data and too much research starts to combat creativity, natural creativity from instinct, if you will?
Sure. I think it's a blend. It's a blend of your own instinct, and it's a blend of the research and the data that you're bringing in, and it's being honest about both. That's why, I mentioned in the talk, it's so important to talk about the trade-offs that you make if you don't do the research. So if we're not going to go do usability studies on this new workflow in our application, here's the outcomes that we could be faced with. If we're not going to go and validate this, here's what we're going to come up with. Conversely, if you become entirely beholden to data and it's all data informed, the data sometimes can lie, and that's where you have to bring your human instinct to it. And I can't remember the study off the top of my head, but there was an in-depth study of A/B testing in particular, where they ran enough studies that they showed statistically significant differences from the A and the B sample, but the A and the B sample were exactly the same product. And so that's why we have to bring our own expertise to it, because sometimes, the data can fail us. And so it's not about becoming data machines. That's why we're here as humans as a part of the process. It's about bringing our own experiences to bear in the products that we design and we deliver.
It's okay to be human too, right? All right, I have a question.
We have to be.
That's right. So working in an older corporation, this would have come with really baby steps, but I definitely see the rewards here. Having strong research backing will totally help with the constant redesign. More of a statement than a question, but your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've worked with a lot of older corporations myself, and I did digital transformation work with older corporations and saw them go through this journey. And I think the most powerful way to engage in those baby steps is to tie it to whatever objectives or questions that they have, and even to bring those people who are stuck in the older way of doing things along with you as an observer for the research. This is another place where being able to record your research sessions is really powerful. Something that I'm looking at right now is a shippable box of research fun that you can put in the mail. It fits in a standard post office box, and you can send to trusted participants to actually observe them in research, has a webcam and has a speaker in it and all of that. I think even just giving people that kit, making sure that you can still see them. I know we're all distributed right now, but making sure you can still see them, recording those sessions, and then sharing a sort of a video highlight reel with the business is a really powerful way to get them to understand what's going on. Because the other thing too is the research word in a business context has a whole new meaning now than it did 15, 20 years ago. And so you have to kind of redefine that and help them break out of their previous understandings of what that means. Those baby steps are so important, and it is a long journey. It's not an immediate line. Have patience and have faith. It's not going to change overnight, but know that eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have more research requests than you know what to do with. And that's where that backlog of business hypotheses is so important.
And who doesn't want to receive a box of fun? I mean, that sounds great.
That's the name of it, right? Like it's guaranteed to be a good time.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. I think we're out of time for questions. I appreciate everything. And thanks for being part of HAL this year for this incredible session.
Yeah. Thank you all very much. Thank you for having me. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in.
If you'd like to continue the conversation, please check out the Experience Design Forum, which you can access from your attendee dashboard. This session will also be available on demand within the next 24 hours and will stay up through the end of February. Thanks for joining us now, and good luck with the next session. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.